Marcus Chen wiped down the same glass for the third time, watching the rain streak down the windows of his bar on the outer rim of New Tokyo Station. The establishment wasn't much to look at: cramped tables, flickering neon signs advertising drinks from a dozen different worlds, and the persistent smell of engine fuel that seemed to seep through the walls from the nearby docking bays. But it was his, and after 15 years of serving drinks to smugglers, traders, and the occasional bounty hunter, he had carved out a small piece of peace in the chaos of the galaxy. The war had ended 3 months ago. The Great Purge, they called it. Humanity had finally done what many thought impossible. They had systematically eliminated every alien species in the known galaxy. It started with the aggressive ones, the Cathara who had raided human colonies for decades. Then it spread to their allies, the peaceful Zephyrians who had only wanted to trade. By the end, even the microscopic veil organisms that lived in deep space had been hunted down and destroyed. Marcus had been a soldier once before he opened the bar. He had seen the efficiency of human military technology, the cold precision with which entire civilizations could be erased from existence. The official reports spoke of humanity's destiny, of taking their rightful place as the dominant species in the galaxy. But Marcus remembered the screams, the desperate transmissions from dying worlds, and the hollow eyes of his fellow soldiers when they came home. The door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see a figure in a dark coat shuffling through the rain. The stranger was tall but moved with a careful gait, keeping their hood pulled low over their face. In a place like New Tokyo Station, anonymity was common currency, and Marcus had learned long ago not to ask too many questions. "What can I get you?" Marcus asked as the figure settled onto a bar stool at the far end of the counter, away from the few other patrons who were nursing their drinks in comfortable silence. "Something warm," the stranger said, their voice soft and oddly melodic. "I have been traveling for a long time." Marcus reached for a bottle of Terran whiskey, then paused. There was something about the stranger's accent, a lilting quality that reminded him of. No, that was impossible. He poured the drink anyway and slid it across the bar. The stranger's hands emerged from beneath the coat to grasp the glass, and Marcus froze. The fingers were too long, too delicate, with a subtle blue tint to the skin that no human cosmetic could replicate. He had seen hands like these before, in classified military briefings and in his nightmares. "You're Zephyrian," Marcus whispered, his hand instinctively moving toward the plasma pistol he kept under the bar. The stranger's hood fell back, revealing features that confirmed Marcus's suspicion. The being had the characteristic angular face of the Zephyrians, with large silver eyes that seemed to hold the weight of entire worlds. Her skin was the pale blue of deep ocean water, and her hair fell in white strands that seemed to shimmer with their own light. "Please," she said, and Marcus could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "I mean no harm. I believe I am the last." Marcus's hand stayed on his weapon, but he didn't draw it. According to every report he had read, every briefing he had attended, there were no Zephyrians left. The final cleansing operation on their homeworld of Zephy's Prime had been confirmed successful 6 weeks ago. Yet here sat a living, breathing member of a species that was supposed to be extinct. "That's impossible," Marcus said. "The military confirmed." "The military confirmed the death of my people," the Zephyrian interrupted, her silver eyes flashing with pain. "But I was not on Zephy's Prime when your ships came. I was here in this sector when I received the last transmission from my homeworld. I heard my children die human. I heard my entire civilization scream and then fall silent." Marcus felt his stomach clench. He remembered the reports from Zephy's Prime, the efficient way the orbital bombardment had been conducted. Clean, they had called it. Necessary. The Zephyrians had been harboring fugitive Cathara warriors, the reports said. They had refused to surrender them for trial. "Why are you here?" Marcus asked, still not moving his hand from the weapon. "Because I have nowhere else to go," she replied, raising the glass of whiskey to her lips. She took a small sip and winced slightly. "Your alcohol burns, but it is warm. I have been cold for so long." Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of deception or threat. In his years as a soldier, he had been trained to identify enemy operatives, to spot the subtle tells that marked someone as dangerous. But all he saw in the Zephyrian's expression was grief so deep it seemed to have hollowed her out from the inside. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she replied. "I was a teacher on Zephy's Prime. I taught children about the stars, about the other species that lived among them. I told them that the galaxy was vast and wonderful, full of beings who could be friends if we just took the time to understand each other. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He had killed Zephyrians during the war. Not directly, he had been an engineer, maintaining the weapons systems on the ships that had carried out the bombardments. But he had known what those systems were being used for, had calibrated them for maximum efficiency. How many children like the ones Lyra had taught had died because of his work? "You shouldn't be here," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "If anyone sees you, if they realize what you are." "I will be killed," Lyra finished. "Yes, I know, but I have been running for 3 months, hiding in cargo holds and abandoned stations. I am tired of running, Marcus Chen." Marcus started. "How do you know my name?" "It is on the sign outside your establishment," Lyra said with what might have been a smile. "Chen's last stop, a fitting name, I think." Marcus looked around the bar. The other patrons were lost in their own worlds, speaking in hushed tones about cargo runs and fuel prices. None of them had noticed the extraordinary being sitting at his bar, the living impossibility that represented everything humanity had worked to destroy. "You can't stay here," Marcus said. "I'm sorry, but it's too dangerous for both of us." Lyra nodded slowly and stood, placing a small device on the bar. Marcus recognized it as a Zephyrian payment crystal, worth more than his bar made in a month. "I understand. Thank you for the warmth, even if it was brief." As she turned to go, Marcus found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "Wait." Lyra paused, not turning around. "There's a storage room in the back," Marcus heard himself say. "No one goes there but me. You could. You could rest there, just for tonight." Lyra turned slowly, her silver eyes wide with surprise. "Why would you help me? I am your enemy. Your people made that very clear." Marcus thought about the question, about the years of propaganda and military briefings that had painted all aliens as threats to humanity's survival. He thought about the efficiency reports and casualty statistics that had reduced entire civilizations to numbers on a page. But mostly, he thought about the exhaustion in Lyra's voice, the weight of loss that he recognized because he carried a similar burden. "Because," Marcus said finally, "I've seen enough death for one lifetime." Lyra studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "One night, I will be gone before dawn." Marcus led her through the narrow hallway behind the bar, past cases of liquor and cleaning supplies, to a small room that he used for storage. It wasn't much a cot he sometimes used when he worked late, a small heater and boxes of inventory, but it was private and warm. "Thank you," Lyra said as she settled onto the cot. "I had begun to think that kindness was extinct in this galaxy." Marcus left her there and returned to the bar, his mind racing. What had he done? Harboring an alien was treason of the highest order. If the authorities discovered Lyra's presence, Marcus would face execution alongside her. But as he served drinks and made small talk with his customers, he found that he felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted from his shoulders. The bar closed at midnight, and Marcus sent his last customers out into the rain. He locked the door and began the familiar routine of cleaning glasses and wiping down tables, but his thoughts kept returning to the storage room and the impossible being resting there. He was putting away the last of the bottles when he heard voices outside. Multiple voices, speaking in the crisp, efficient tones of military personnel. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice as he recognized the cadence of an Imperial patrol. "Establishment scan indicates thermal signatures consistent with occupation," one voice said. "Proceed with standard inspection protocol." Marcus moved quickly to the storage room, finding Lyra already awake and alert on the cot. "Imperial patrol," he whispered. "They're coming in." Lyra's face went pale, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light like mirrors. "I should run if they find me here." "There's nowhere to run," Marcus said, his mind working furiously. "The back exit leads to an alley. They'll have it covered." Heavy fists pounded on the front door. "Imperial security, open immediately." Marcus looked around the storage room desperately, his eyes falling on a large shipping container that held bulk alcohol supplies. "Can you fit in there?" Lyra nodded and moved quickly to the container, folding her tall frame into the cramped space. Marcus sealed the container just as the pounding on the door intensified. "Coming," Marcus called, forcing his voice to sound normal. He walked to the front door, taking deep breaths to calm his racing heart, and opened it to find 3 Imperial security officers in their black uniforms waiting on his doorstep. "Marcus Chen," the lead officer asked, consulting a data pad, "owner and operator of this establishment." "That's right," Marcus replied, stepping aside to let them enter. "Is there a problem, officers?" "Routine inspection," the officer said, his cold eyes scanning the interior of the bar. "We've received reports of suspicious activity in this sector. Possible alien sympathizer operating out of this area." Marcus felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead, but he kept his expression neutral. "Alien sympathizer? I thought all the aliens were dead." "Officially, yes," the officer said. "But intelligence suggests that some may have escaped the final operations. We're conducting sweeps to ensure complete compliance with Imperial Directive 7749. The officers began to search the bar systematically, running scanning devices over tables and chairs, checking behind the bar and in the basement storage areas. Marcus watched, trying to appear curious rather than terrified, as they moved closer to the back hallway. "What's back there?" one of the officers asked, pointing toward the storage room. "Just supplies," Marcus said. "Alcohol, cleaning equipment, nothing interesting." The officer nodded and walked down the hallway, his scanner beeping softly as it analyzed thermal signatures and chemical traces. Marcus held his breath as the man reached the storage room and began to examine the containers and boxes. "Large container here shows elevated temperature readings," the officer called to his colleagues. "Could indicate recent biological activity." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as the officer approached the container where Lyra was hiding. The scanner beeped more insistently as it detected the heat signature from inside. "Probably just thermal retention from the alcohol," Marcus said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "That container holds high-proof spirits. They tend to hold heat longer than other liquids." The officer paused, considering this explanation. He tapped the container with his scanning device and frowned at the readings. "Readings are consistent with biological presence." Marcus thought fast. "I was working back there earlier tonight doing inventory. I probably heated up the whole area. These storage rooms don't have great ventilation." The officer looked at him suspiciously, then at his scanner, then back at Marcus. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the three of them stood frozen in the storage room while Marcus wondered if this was how his life would end, shot down in his own bar for harboring the galaxy's last alien. Then the lead officer's comm device crackled to life. "Unit 7, report to Sector 15 immediately. We have confirmed alien sympathizer activity at the transport hub." "Understood, Command," the lead officer replied. He looked at Marcus one more time. "Keep your eyes open, Chen. Any suspicious activity, you report it immediately." "Of course, officer," Marcus said. "Always happy to do my part for Imperial security." The officers filed out of the storage room and back through the bar. Marcus followed them, his legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. The lead officer paused at the front door and turned back to Marcus. "You served in the war, didn't you, Chen?" Marcus nodded. "Engineering Corps, 15th Fleet." "Good unit," the officer said. "They did important work in the final operations. Patriots like you understand why complete extermination was necessary. The galaxy is safer now." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. "Much safer." The officers left, disappearing into the rain and darkness. Marcus locked the door behind them and leaned against it, his whole body shaking with the aftermath of terror and adrenaline. He waited 10 minutes to make sure they were really gone before returning to the storage room. Lyra emerged from the container, her pale blue skin even paler than before. "They were looking for me specifically," she said. Marcus nodded grimly. "Looks that way, which means someone knows you're still alive." "I should leave," Lyra said. "You have already risked too much for me." Marcus looked at her, this impossible survivor of humanity's greatest act of genocide, and made a decision that would change everything. "No, you're not leaving." Lyra stared at him in surprise. "I do not understand." "I've been telling myself for 3 months that the war was necessary," Marcus said. "That the aliens were a threat, that humanity had to survive at any cost. But looking at you, listening to you talk about teaching children about the stars, I can't pretend anymore that what we did was right." "Marcus." "They're going to keep hunting you," Marcus continued. And probably others like you if any others survived. But this bar, this little corner of the galaxy, it's mine. And I'm not going to let them turn it into another execution chamber. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her silver eyes searching Marcus's face. Do you understand what you are saying, what you are choosing? Marcus thought about his comfortable life, his quiet bar, his peaceful existence on the margins of the Empire. He thought about the price of resistance, the certainty of discovery and execution that came with defying imperial will. But mostly, he thought about the children Lyra had taught, and all the other children across the galaxy who would never get the chance to learn about the stars. Yeah, he said, I understand. Outside, the rain continued to fall on New Tokyo Station, washing away the dust and grime of another day in humanity's perfect galaxy. But inside Chen's last stop, something new was beginning, a small act of rebellion that would grow into something the Empire never saw coming. Because Marcus Chen had learned something that night that the Empire's planners had overlooked in all their careful calculations about human superiority and alien extermination. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a weapon or a warship or an army. Sometimes, it was just one human being who decided to say no. 3 weeks had passed since the Imperial Patrol, and Marcus had developed a routine that kept both him and Lyra alive. During the day, she stayed hidden in the modified storage room he had expanded and improved, complete with better ventilation, a small workstation, and books he had quietly acquired from various traders. At night, after the bar closed, she would emerge to help him with cleaning and inventory, their conversations stretching into the early hours of the morning. Marcus had learned more about the galaxy in those 3 weeks than he had in his entire military career. Lyra spoke of civilizations that had existed for millennia before humans even discovered space travel, of art forms that could convey emotions directly from one mind to another, of scientific discoveries that had been lost forever when their creators were exterminated. She told him about the Cathara's sacred music, which could supposedly heal psychological trauma, and the Veil's ability to predict stellar events centuries in advance. Your people could have learned so much from us, Lyra said one night as she helped Marcus organize shipments of rare spirits. The Zephyrians were always eager to share knowledge. We believed that wisdom grew stronger when it was shared freely. Marcus paused in his work, looking at her. What would you have taught us? Lyra smiled, the expression transforming her angular features. Patience, perhaps. Your species moves so quickly, always rushing toward the next goal. We lived for centuries, watching stars be born and die. We understood that some things cannot be hurried. Like what? Peace, Lyra said simply. True peace between species takes generations to build. It requires trust, and trust grows slowly, like a tree reaching toward sunlight. Your leaders tried to achieve security through destruction instead of patience through understanding. Marcus thought about this as he locked away the expensive bottles. The Empire's propaganda had always emphasized humanity's urgency, their need to secure resources and territory before other species could threaten them. The idea that peace might have been possible through patience rather than violence was something he had never considered. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus was serving breakfast to a table of cargo haulers when a woman in an expensive suit walked into the bar. She was clearly not a regular customer. Her clothing was too clean, her posture too confident, her eyes too alert as they swept the room. Marcus recognized the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Mr. Chen, she asked, approaching the bar. I'm Director Sarah Voss, Imperial Intelligence Division. I'd like to speak with you privately. Marcus felt his stomach drop, but he kept his expression neutral. Of course, Director, my office is in the back. He led her to a small room behind the bar that he used for paperwork, carefully positioning himself between her and the hallway that led to Lyra's hiding place. Director Voss was younger than he had expected, perhaps 40, with sharp features and gray eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Please sit, she said, as if the office belonged to her rather than him. Marcus sat, nodding that she remained standing, a classic interrogation technique designed to establish dominance. I'll be direct, Mr. Chen, Voss said. We have intelligence suggesting that alien survivors may be operating in this sector. Specifically, we believe a Zephyrian may have escaped the final cleansing operations. Marcus forced himself to look surprised. I thought all the aliens were eliminated. That's what the reports said. Official reports, yes, Voss replied. But intelligence operations sometimes reveal discrepancies. We've tracked a Zephyrian life sign to this general area, but it vanished approximately 3 weeks ago. The same night, coincidentally, that a patrol conducted routine inspections in this sector. Coincidentally, Marcus repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. Voss smiled, and Marcus realized that she knew. Somehow, she knew about Lyra, and she was playing a game with him. You served with distinction in the war, Mr. Chen. The 15th Fleet's Engineering Corps was responsible for some of our most effective planetary bombardment systems. Your work contributed directly to the elimination of 3 alien homeworlds. Marcus felt sick, but he nodded. I did my duty. Indeed, which makes your current situation so interesting. Voss sat down across from him, her gray eyes never leaving his face. Tell me, Mr. Chen, what do you think happens to humans who aid alien fugitives? I imagine they're executed, Marcus said quietly. Actually, no, Voss replied, surprising him. Execution would be wasteful. Humans who demonstrate alien sympathies are typically sent to rehabilitation centers where they can be helped to remember their loyalty to the species. It's quite effective, though the process can be unpleasant. Marcus said nothing, waiting for her to continue. However, Voss went on, there are situations where exceptions can be made. For instance, if a human who had aided an alien fugitive were to demonstrate renewed loyalty by helping to capture that fugitive, their past errors might be overlooked. I see, Marcus said, and what would happen to the alien in such a scenario? That would depend on the alien's value, Voss replied. A common Zephyrian would simply be eliminated, but a Zephyrian who possessed unique knowledge or abilities might be kept alive for study. In secure conditions, of course. Marcus understood the offer being made. Betray Lyra and he would live. Refuse and he would face rehabilitation or death. It was a test of loyalty, designed to determine whether his allegiance lay with humanity or with the alien he was harboring. Director, Marcus said carefully, I appreciate you coming to me directly rather than simply arresting me. But I have to ask, what makes you think I'm involved in this situation? Voss reached into her jacket and produced a small device that Marcus recognized as a biological scanner. Your bar has been under surveillance for the past week. This device has detected Zephyrian pheromones in your establishment, faint but unmistakable. The alien has been here. Marcus felt his heart racing, but he forced himself to remain calm. A lot of different people come through here. Traders, smugglers, refugees, maybe someone tracked in traces from an abandoned alien site. Possible, Voss admitted, but unlikely. The pheromone traces indicate recent, prolonged contact. Someone has been interacting with a living Zephyrian on a regular basis. She leaned forward, her voice becoming softer, almost sympathetic. Mr. Chen, I understand how this might have happened. The war was difficult for many veterans. Some developed misplaced guilt about their necessary actions. It's not uncommon for soldiers to seek some form of redemption, even if that redemption is misguided. Marcus looked at her, this smooth, confident representative of the empire that had committed genocide and called it necessary. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help us, Voss said simply. The alien will trust you. Arrange a meeting or simply tell us when it's likely to be here. We'll handle the rest cleanly and quietly. And in exchange, your record is expunged. Your service to the empire is noted with gratitude. You continue running your bar and this conversation never happened. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer. It was reasonable, logical even. Lyra was doomed anyway, the Empire would find her eventually. By cooperating, Marcus could save himself and possibly even ensure that Lyra was treated better than she would be otherwise. Can I think about it? Marcus asked finally. Voss smiled. Of course, but not for too long. My superiors are eager to resolve this matter. Shall we say 48 hours? That should be enough time. Voss stood and moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Chen, I hope you'll make the right choice. The galaxy is a dangerous place for those who stand against human progress. After she left, Marcus sat in his office for a long time, staring at the walls and trying to process what had just happened. He had 48 hours to decide whether to betray the galaxy's last Zephyrian or risk everything he had built to protect her. That night after the bar closed, Marcus told Lyra about Director Voss's visit. He expected her to be afraid, to panic, to immediately begin planning her escape. Instead, she listened calmly and nodded when he finished. "She is right, you know," Lyra said quietly. "I am doomed. The Empire will find me eventually, whether you help them or not. You should take her offer." Marcus stared at her. "What?" "You have a life here, Marcus, a purpose. If you are captured helping me, that life ends. Better that one of us survives than neither." "I can't do that," Marcus said. "I won't." "Why?" Lyra asked. "I am already dead, Marcus. My people are gone, my world is ash, my culture exists now only in my memories. When I die, all of that dies with me. But you could live, could remember us, could perhaps find a way to honor what we were." Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the lights of New Tokyo Station. Ships came and went in the darkness, carrying cargo and passengers throughout the Empire's territory. All of it built on the ashes of extinct civilizations, all of it made possible by the greatest act of genocide in galactic history. "You want to know why I can't do it?" Marcus said, turning back to Lyra. "Because I was there. I was part of the machine that killed your people. I calibrated the weapons that destroyed your worlds. I checked the targeting systems that murdered your children." Lyra was quiet, watching him with her silver eyes. "For 3 months, I've been telling myself that I was just following orders, that I was just doing my job," Marcus continued. "But that's bullshit. I knew what those weapons were for. I knew what we were doing. And I did it anyway because it was easier than saying no. The war is over, Marcus. Nothing you do now will bring my people back." "No," Marcus agreed. "But maybe it's not about bringing them back. Maybe it's about making sure that what happened to them never happens again." Lyra tilted her head, a gesture he had learned indicated confusion or interest. "What do you mean?" Marcus had been thinking about this for days, an idea growing in his mind like a seed taking root. The Empire's strength comes from the belief that they eliminated all opposition, that they achieved perfect victory. But what if they didn't? What if there were survivors? "I am one survivor, Marcus. One Zephyrian against an empire of trillions of humans." "For now," Marcus said. "But the Empire isn't as solid as it appears. There are humans who weren't comfortable with the genocide, veterans who came home with nightmares, civilians who remember alien friends and neighbors. The Empire has to work constantly to maintain the narrative that the extermination was necessary and complete." "You think there might be other survivors?" "I think it's possible," Marcus said. "And I think that if there are, they need to know they're not alone. They need safe places, people willing to help them, networks that can move them from one hiding place to another." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "You are talking about resistance." "I'm talking about survival," Marcus corrected. "Not just yours, but the survival of everything the Empire tried to destroy. Knowledge, culture, the possibility that things could be different. It would be incredibly dangerous." "Yes, we would almost certainly be caught and killed." "Probably." Lyra smiled, and Marcus was surprised to see hope in her expression for the first time since he had met her. "My people had a saying, 'The stars shine brightest when the night is darkest.'" "What does it mean?" "That hope is most powerful when it seems most impossible." Lyra stood and walked to the window, looking out at the same lights Marcus had been watching. "If we are to do this, we cannot work alone. We will need allies, resources, secure locations." Marcus nodded. "I've been thinking about that too. There are traders who come through here, smugglers who operate outside Imperial oversight. Some of them fought in the war and weren't happy about what they had to do. If we're careful, we might be able to identify potential allies." "And Director Voss?" Marcus thought about the Imperial intelligence officer, her cold confidence and her implicit threats. "I'll tell her I haven't seen any aliens, that her information was wrong. It'll buy us some time, but not much." "She will not believe you." "No, she won't, but she'll have to prove I'm lying, and that takes time. We'll use every hour we can get." Over the next several hours, they began to plan. Lyra shared her knowledge of alien technology and culture that might be valuable to potential survivors. Marcus used his contacts among the traders and smugglers to identify people who might be sympathetic to their cause. They developed codes and signals, safe words and emergency procedures. By dawn, they had the beginnings of a plan. It was dangerous, probably impossible, and would likely get them both killed. But for the first time since the war ended, Marcus felt like he was doing something that mattered. "There's one thing I need to ask you," Marcus said as they finished their planning session. The Empire claims that aliens were a threat to humanity, that the extermination was necessary for human survival. Is there any truth to that? Lyra considered the question carefully. Some species were aggressive, yes. The Cathara had a warrior culture that valued conquest. The sector were territorial and hostile to outsiders, but most of us, we were explorers, teachers, artists, farmers. We wanted to learn from each other and share what we had discovered. The Empire said you were harboring Cathara fugitives. We were, Lyra admitted, but not for military purposes. We were trying to help them adapt to a peaceful existence. Many Cathara wanted to abandon their warrior traditions but didn't know how. We were teaching them alternatives. Marcus absorbed this information, so the Empire's justification was partially true but fundamentally wrong, Lyra said. Yes, there were dangerous aliens, but the solution was not extermination. The solution was patience, understanding, and the willingness to help others change. Marcus nodded. It was what he had suspected, but hearing it confirmed helped solidify his resolve. The Empire had chosen the easy path of destruction over the difficult path of peace. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to try the harder way. When Director Voss returned 48 hours later, Marcus was ready for her. "Have you made your decision, Mr. Chen?" she asked, settling into the same chair in his office. "I have," Marcus replied. "I can't help you." Voss's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw her hand move slightly closer to her weapon. "I see. And why is that?" "Because I haven't seen any aliens," Marcus said calmly. "Your information was wrong. Whatever your sensors detected, it wasn't an alien in my bar." "Mr. Chen," Voss said softly, "I really hoped you would be more cooperative." "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Director, but I can't help with something that isn't real." Voss stood and walked to the door, then turned back. "Very well, but you should know that my investigation isn't ending here. I'll be watching your establishment very carefully from now on. And when I find the proof I need, and I will find it, your cooperation will no longer be an option." After she left, Marcus allowed himself a moment of fear. He had just declared war on the Empire, and the Empire did not lose wars. But then he thought about Lyra, hidden in her secret room, the last keeper of an entire civilization's knowledge and culture. He thought about the children she had taught and the stars she had helped them understand. The galaxy's most powerful empire had declared that hope was extinct. But in a small bar on the rim of human space, hope had found a new champion, and Marcus Chen was going to make sure it survived, no matter what the cost. 2 months had passed since Marcus's confrontation with Director Voss, and Chen's last stop had quietly transformed into something the Empire would have found impossible to imagine. The first safe house in what was becoming an underground network dedicated to preserving what remained of the galaxy's lost civilizations. The transformation had started small. Marcus had begun having careful conversations with certain customers, feeling out their opinions about the war and its aftermath. A smuggler named Tors, who had served in the same fleet as Marcus, admitted over several drinks that he still had nightmares about the orbital bombardments. A trader called Singh mentioned that her daughter had been studying alien languages in school before they were banned, and she couldn't understand why learning about other cultures had suddenly become treasonous. These conversations led to others, and gradually, Marcus found himself connected to a loose network of humans who, while not actively opposed to the Empire, were uncomfortable with the totality of the genocide. Many were veterans who had seen too much death. Others were academics whose work had been declared illegal overnight. And still others were simply people who remembered alien friends and neighbors and couldn't reconcile those memories with the Empire's narrative of necessary extermination. The network operated through layers of security that Lyra had helped design, using principles of Zephyrian information theory that were far more sophisticated than anything humanity had developed. Communications were passed through multiple intermediaries. Meetings were arranged using codes embedded in seemingly normal commercial transactions, and safe houses were established in locations that appeared completely ordinary to casual observation. Marcus's bar was perfect for such operations. Customers came and went at all hours, conversations were expected to be private, and the constant flow of traders meant that new faces didn't attract attention. Lyra remained hidden during the day, but her expertise proved invaluable in planning operations and analyzing intelligence that filtered in from across the sector. The breakthrough came when Tors brought news that changed everything. "There's something you need to know," the smuggler said one evening, his weathered face grim as he nursed a bottle of Centauri beer. I was out near the Kepler debris field last week, salvaging components from the old battlefields. Found something the Imperial cleanup crews missed. Marcus continued wiping down glasses, but he was listening intently. The Kepler system had been the site of a major battle during the war, where a coalition of alien species had made their final stand against human forces. What kind of something? Marcus asked. Tors looked around the bar, confirming that the other customers were occupied with their own conversations. An escape pod, sector designed but modified. Someone had been living in it for months. Marcus's hand stilled on the glass he was cleaning. The sector had been one of the most technologically advanced species, known for their ability to survive in environments that would kill most other forms of life. If someone had been living in an escape pod for months. Was anyone still in it? Marcus asked quietly. No, but there were signs of recent occupation. Food supplies, personal effects, technical equipment. And Marcus, Tors leaned closer. There were star charts, navigation data for routes through unexplored space beyond the Empire's borders. That night after the bar closed, Marcus shared the news with Lyra. Her reaction was immediate and intense. Her silver eyes widened, and she stood so quickly that she knocked over the chair she had been sitting in. Are you certain he said sector? She asked urgently. Yes, why? Because if the sector survived, if even a few of them escaped. Lyra paced the small storage room, her mind clearly racing. Marcus, the sector were the galaxy's masters of survival technology. They could live in vacuum for short periods, could metabolize radiation, could enter suspended animation for years at a time. If any species could have survived the genocide, it would be them. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with excitement. So there might be others out there. More than that, Lyra said, turning to face him. The sector were also master record keepers. They documented everything: history, science, culture, art. If they survived, they would have taken archives with them. Complete records of dozens of civilizations that the Empire thinks it destroyed. The implications were staggering. The Empire's power was built on the narrative that alien civilizations had been completely eliminated, their knowledge and culture erased from existence. But if comprehensive archives survived, if proof existed that alien civilizations had possessed wisdom and achievements that humanity had destroyed. We have to find them, Marcus said. Yes, Lyra agreed, but carefully. If the Empire learns that alien survivors exist beyond their borders, they will launch new campaigns of extermination. We need to locate these survivors and establish contact without alerting Imperial intelligence. Over the following weeks, Marcus and his network began working to trace the origin of the escape pod Tors had found. Using the navigation data he had copied, they mapped possible routes that fleeing aliens might have taken to escape the galaxy. The work was painstaking and dangerous. Too much interest in galactic navigation would attract attention from Imperial monitors who watched for signs of rebellion or unauthorized exploration. The answer came from an unexpected source. Singh, the trader whose daughter had studied alien languages, brought word that her cousin worked in the Imperial Archives Service. The cousin had mentioned, during a family gathering, that there were significant gaps in the record of alien ship movements during the final phases of the war. Entire fleets had simply vanished from Imperial tracking, their final destinations unknown. She said her supervisors ordered those records classified at the highest levels, Singh reported during one of their clandestine meetings. Apparently, the Empire doesn't want anyone to know that they lost track of alien survivors. This confirmation that the Empire itself suspected alien survivors existed gave new urgency to the search. If Imperial intelligence was already investigating, then any delay could prove fatal. Marcus made the decision to reach out to more aggressive members of the network, people who were willing to take greater risks for the possibility of greater rewards. That decision brought Captain Elena Vasquez to his bar. Vasquez was a former Imperial Navy officer who had resigned her commission immediately after the war ended. She was tall, scarred, and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. More importantly, she owned a fast ship and had contacts among other veterans who shared her discomfort with the Empire's methods. Tors tells me you're looking for ghosts, she said without preamble, sitting at the bar after hours when the other customers had left. I'm looking for the truth, Marcus replied. There's a difference. Maybe, but truth-seeking can be as dangerous as ghost hunting in the current political climate. Vasquez studied Marcus with sharp eyes. Why should I risk my ship and crew for your truth? Marcus had prepared for this question, because you were at the Battle of Proxima. Vasquez's expression hardened. What do you know about Proxima? I know that you commanded a destroyer escort during the final bombardment. I know that your ship's targeting computer malfunctioned and you had to fire manually. And I know that your after-action report mentioned civilian shelters that weren't supposed to exist. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, her hands gripping her drink tightly. Those shelters were full of children, alien children who were trying to hide while their parents died above ground. Command ordered us to fire anyway. Did you? Yes, Vasquez said quietly. I followed orders. I killed children because I was told it was necessary for human survival. Marcus saw the pain in her eyes, the same guilt that he carried about his own role in the genocide. What if I told you that some of those children's relatives might have survived? That they're out there somewhere keeping their cultures alive? I'd say you were offering me a chance at redemption that I don't deserve. Maybe, but I'd also say that those survivors need help, and you have the skills and resources to provide it. Vasquez finished her drink and stood. If I do this, if I take my ship out to look for alien survivors and the Empire catches me, I'll be executed as a traitor. Yes. And if I find these survivors and they're hostile, if they want revenge for what we did to their people, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Vasquez nodded slowly. When do we leave? 3 days later, Marcus found himself aboard the Redemption, Vasquez's modified cargo hauler, heading toward the edge of Imperial space. Lyra had insisted on coming despite the risks, arguing that her knowledge of alien technology and culture would be essential if they actually made contact with survivors. The ship's crew consisted of 6 former Imperial personnel who shared Vasquez's complicated feelings about the war. They were professionals, but Marcus could see the doubt and fear in their faces. They were embarking on a mission that could end with their deaths, all to find aliens that might not even exist. The journey to the coordinates Tors had provided took 8 days, during which Marcus learned more about the technical aspects of interstellar travel than he had ever wanted to know. The Redemption was a fast ship, but the route they were following took them through areas of space that were poorly mapped and potentially dangerous. The aliens who came this way were running for their lives, Vasquez explained as they approached their destination. They wouldn't have worried about stellar hazards or navigation risks. They would have taken the fastest route out of Imperial space, regardless of the dangers. When they finally reached the Kepler debris field, Marcus was struck by the scale of the destruction. The battlefield stretched across millions of kilometers, filled with the twisted remains of ships from a dozen different species. Imperial cleanup crews had salvaged the most valuable wreckage, but the sheer amount of debris made complete recovery impossible. There, Tors said, pointing to a section of the field where several alien ships had clustered together in their final moments. That's where I found the escape pod. Vasquez maneuvered the Redemption carefully through the debris field, using the ship's sensors to scan for anything that might indicate the direction the escape pod's occupants had taken. The work was slow and methodical, requiring them to examine thousands of pieces of wreckage for clues about the movements of long-dead aliens. It was Lyra who made the breakthrough. There, she said, pointing to a section of the sensor display that showed a cluster of small objects. Those are not natural formations. Vasquez enhanced the sensor image, revealing what appeared to be a trail of deliberately placed markers leading away from the main debris field. Each marker was a small device, barely larger than a human hand, that emitted a faint signal in a frequency range that human sensors rarely monitored. It's a trail, Marcus realized. They left us a trail to follow. Not us specifically, Lyra said, but they left a trail for any of their people who might come looking. These are sector navigation markers designed to guide survivors to safety. Following the trail took them beyond the edge of Imperial space, into regions that human ships rarely visited. The journey was tense, with constant sensor sweeps to ensure they weren't being followed by Imperial patrols. But gradually, the markers led them toward a system that didn't appear on any human star charts. Unknown system ahead, Vasquez reported as they approached their destination. 3 planets, one in the habitable zone, I'm reading artificial structures on the surface of the second planet. Marcus felt his heart racing as the implications sank in. They had found it, a hidden colony where alien survivors had established a new home beyond the reach of human extermination fleets. Are they still alive? Lyra asked urgently. Vasquez ran detailed scans, her expression growing more amazed by the minute. Power signatures consistent with active civilization, multiple species identifiers, and Marcus. They're broadcasting. Broadcasting what? Cultural transmission, music, poetry, historical records. They're not just surviving out here, they're preserving everything the Empire tried to destroy. As the Redemption entered orbit around the planet, Marcus looked out at the surface and saw cities that gleamed with technologies humanity had never developed. Gardens that sprawled across continents in patterns that spoke of artistic vision as much as agricultural necessity. And most importantly, ships in orbit that bore the designs of species that the Empire had declared extinct. My God, Vasquez whispered, how many do you think are down there? Thousands, Lyra said, tears streaming down her pale blue cheeks. Maybe tens of thousands. They did it, Marcus. They saved themselves. A communication request appeared on the ship's displays, transmitted in multiple alien languages. Lyra quickly activated the translation protocols she had prepared, and a voice filled the bridge, warm, welcoming, and speaking accented standard. Unknown vessel, this is Haven Control. We detect Zephyrian life signs aboard your ship. Be welcome, survivors. You have found sanctuary. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling a weight that he had carried for years finally beginning to lift. They had done it. Against all odds, in defiance of the galaxy's most powerful empire, they had found proof that hope could survive even the darkest night. But as he opened his eyes and looked at the beautiful world below, Marcus realized that their mission was just beginning. Now they had to figure out how to protect this sanctuary and the thousands of alien survivors who called it home. Because the Empire would never stop hunting them, and when they were finally discovered, the consequences would be beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Redemption had found Haven, but now Haven needed protectors. And Marcus Chen, former Imperial engineer turned bartender turned rebel, was about to become the guardian of the galaxy's greatest secret. The surface of Haven was more beautiful than Marcus had imagined possible. As the Redemption descended through the planet's atmosphere, he pressed his face to the viewport and watched cities that seemed to grow from the landscape itself rather than being imposed upon it. Crystalline spires reached toward the sky while maintaining perfect harmony with the forests that surrounded them. Rivers had been channeled into artistic patterns that served both practical and aesthetic purposes. Everything spoke of civilizations that had learned to work with their environment rather than dominating it. It's what our worlds could have been, Lyra said softly, standing beside him. Before the war, before the fear and hatred, this is what the galaxy could have become if we had chosen cooperation over conquest. The landing pad they were directed to was clearly designed to accommodate ships from multiple species. Marcus saw sector vessels with their distinctive biometallic hulls, Zephyrian craft that seemed to shimmer with internal light, and several ships of designs he didn't recognize at all. As the Redemption settled onto the pad, he realized that they were not just visiting a hidden colony, they were entering a functioning multi-species civilization. The welcoming committee that met them at the ship's ramp was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. A tall sector with silver skin and geometric tattoos stood beside a being that Marcus didn't recognize humanoid, but with 4 arms and skin that shifted color like a chameleon. Between them stood a Zephyrian female whose resemblance to Lyra was so striking that Marcus wondered if they might be related. "Welcome to Haven," the sector said in accented standard. "I am Administrator Keth. We have been monitoring Imperial communications for years, hoping that someone would find the trail we left. When our sensors detected Lyra's biometric signature aboard your vessel, we could hardly believe it." Lyra stepped forward, her silver eyes wide with disbelief. "Administrator Keth, but you were reported killed in the assault on Sector Prime." "As were you, according to Imperial records," Keth replied with what might have been a smile. "Death, it seems, has been greatly exaggerated in both our cases." The reunion was emotional, but Marcus found his attention drawn to the multi-armed being who had remained silent during the exchange. There was something about their posture, the way their skin colors shifted in complex patterns, that suggested they were communicating in a way he couldn't understand. "This is Counselor Jara of the Zelnari," Keth explained, noticing Marcus's attention. "Their species was thought extinct even before the war began. The Zelnari have been hiding in the deep void for centuries, avoiding contact with aggressive species." Jara's skin shifted to pale blue patterns as they spoke in a musical voice. "We emerged from hiding when the sector found us, drawn by distress signals from the dying worlds. We could not save your civilizations, but we could help preserve what survived." Over the following days, Marcus learned the incredible story of Haven's creation. The colony had been established by sector survivors who had escaped the destruction of their homeworld, but it had quickly grown into something much larger. Using their advanced survival technology and the Zelnari's knowledge of hiding in deep space, they had created a sanctuary where refugees from across the galaxy could gather. The population was approaching 50,000 beings from over 20 different species. Some, like the Zephyrians and Sector, were survivors of worlds that had been completely destroyed. Others, like the Cathara, were descendants of refugees who had escaped earlier conflicts. Still others, like the mysterious Veil Collective, were beings that humanity had never even known existed. "We have preserved the knowledge of every civilization that has found its way here," Keth explained as he led Marcus and Lyra through Haven's central archive complex. "Art, science, philosophy, history, everything that the Empire sought to destroy." The archives were vast, with storage systems that utilized technologies from dozens of different species. Marcus saw Cathara memory crystals that could store the complete experiences of an individual Zephyrian quantum databases that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and Zelnari bioneural networks that could process information at speeds no computer could match. "This is incredible," Marcus said, overwhelmed by the scale of what he was seeing. "You've preserved entire civilizations here." "We have preserved their knowledge," Keth corrected. "But knowledge without the living communities that created it is incomplete. We need populations, not just archives. We need children to learn the old songs, artists to create new works, scientists to build upon ancient discoveries." Marcus understood the implications. Haven was a library and a refuge, but it was not a replacement for the living civilizations that had been destroyed. The survivors here were maintaining their cultures as best they could, but without growth and renewal, those cultures would eventually fade away regardless of how well their knowledge was preserved. "What do you need?" Marcus asked. "More survivors," Keth said simply. "We know that aliens are still hiding throughout Imperial space. Some are deep undercover, passing as humans through genetic modification or technological disguise. Others are hiding in remote locations, afraid to reveal themselves. They need to know that Haven exists, that they have a place to come where they can be safe." "Getting word to hidden survivors won't be enough," Captain Vasquez interjected. She had been quiet during most of the tour, but Marcus could see her military mind working. "If you want to bring significant numbers of refugees here, you'll need transportation. Ships, pilots, navigational data, fuel stations along the escape routes." "And security," added Chen, one of Vasquez's crew members who had joined the tour. "The Empire has been expanding its patrol coverage since the war ended. Any increase in traffic along the rim will be noticed." Keth nodded gravely. "These are all problems we have identified, but the solutions require resources we do not possess. We can survive here indefinitely, but we cannot mount large-scale rescue operations with the few ships we have." That evening, as the visitors from the Redemption met in private to discuss what they had learned, Marcus found himself facing the biggest decision of his life. Haven represented everything he had hoped to find: proof that the Empire's genocide had not been complete, that alien civilizations could survive and thrive given the chance. But it also represented an enormous responsibility. "They need help," Lyra said, stating the obvious. "Not just supplies or transportation, but an entire network capable of identifying, contacting, and evacuating hidden aliens throughout Imperial space." "It's impossible," Chen said bluntly. "The resources required, the security challenges, the risk of discovery. We're talking about operations that would dwarf anything the rebellion attempted during the war." "The rebellion failed," Vasquez pointed out. "They tried to fight the Empire directly and were crushed, but this would be different. We wouldn't be trying to overthrow the Empire just to save the people they're hunting." Marcus thought about the modest network they had already established around his bar. Tours, Singh and the others were good people willing to take reasonable risks, but what Keth was describing would require something far beyond their capabilities. "We need to start small," Marcus said finally. "Prove that it can be done on a limited scale before we try anything bigger." "What did you have in mind?" Vasquez asked. "We go back to Imperial space and identify one hidden alien, just one. We plan and execute a rescue operation to bring them to Haven. If we can do that successfully, we use the experience to plan larger operations." Keth had been listening to their conversation, and now he spoke up. "We may be able to help with that. Our monitoring of Imperial communications has identified several promising leads, individuals whose behavior patterns suggest they may be hiding alien heritage." Over the next several hours, Keth shared intelligence that Haven's survivors had gathered over the years since the war ended. They had been monitoring Imperial data networks, tracking the movements of ships and people throughout human space, looking for anomalies that might indicate hidden aliens. One case stood out immediately. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a xenobiologist working at a research facility on the rim world of Kepler 438b, had been displaying behavior patterns that suggested she might be more than she appeared. Her research focused on theoretical alien biochemistry, despite the fact that such work was officially discouraged. She had been observed making regular trips to remote locations on her world, supposedly for field research, but always alone and without official authorization. "Her genetic profile shows no anomalies," Keth explained, "but that could indicate advanced shape-shifting abilities or technological disguise. Her psychological profile suggests someone maintaining a deep cover identity. Or it could mean she's just a human scientist who's interested in forbidden knowledge," Vasquez pointed out. "True," Keth admitted, "but her location makes her a good test case. Kepler 438b is lightly monitored, and there are established smuggling routes in that sector. If we're wrong about her identity, the exposure would be minimal." Marcus studied the data on Dr. Rodriguez, noting the subtle patterns that had attracted Haven's attention. The timing of her research publications, her travel patterns, her social connections taken individually, none of them were suspicious. But together, they painted a picture of someone who was very carefully maintaining a false identity. "How do we approach her?" Marcus asked. "If she is an alien in hiding, she's going to be extremely paranoid. Any contact could cause her to run or, worse, expose herself to Imperial authorities." "Carefully," Lyra said. "We use the same methods that brought me to your bar. We create a situation where she feels safe making contact, where the risk of exposure seems worth the potential reward." Over the following days, they developed a plan that was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would return to his bar and resume normal operations, while Vasquez used her ship to establish a supply route to Kepler 438b. During routine trade runs, they would observe Dr. Rodriguez and look for opportunities to make subtle contact. The key would be patience. If Rodriguez was indeed an alien in hiding, she would be extremely careful about revealing herself. They would need to demonstrate over time that they could be trusted, that they represented hope rather than a trap. This could take months, Vasquez warned as they finalized their preparations to leave Haven. "Good," Marcus replied. "If it was easy, the Empire would have found her already." As the Redemption prepared to depart Haven and begin the long journey back to Imperial space, Marcus stood on the observation deck looking down at the planet below. Thousands of aliens were living their lives in safety down there, preserving the knowledge and culture of extinct civilizations while building something new from the ashes of the old. But for every alien safe on Haven, there might be dozens still hiding in Imperial space, living in constant fear of discovery and death. The task ahead seemed overwhelming, the chances of success minimal, and the consequences of failure devastating. Yet as Marcus watched the lights of Haven's cities twinkling in the darkness, he felt something he hadn't experienced since the war ended: purpose. For the first time in years, he was doing something that mattered, something that could make a real difference in the galaxy. The Empire had declared that hope was extinct, that their vision of human supremacy was the only possible future. But down on Haven's surface, hope was not just alive, it was thriving. And Marcus Chen, a bartender from the rim of human space, was going to make sure it continued to thrive. The real work was just beginning. 6 months had passed since Marcus returned from Haven, and Chen's last stop had become the nerve center of an operation that would have seemed impossible just a year before. What had started as one man protecting one alien had evolved into a sophisticated network spanning dozens of systems, dedicated to finding and evacuating the hidden survivors of humanity's war of extermination. The rescue of Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been their proof of concept. It had taken 3 months of careful observation and subtle contact attempts before they discovered that Rodriguez was indeed not human. She was a Kelter, a species renowned for their shape-shifting abilities and their mastery of biological sciences. Her people had been among the first targets of the Empire's genocidal campaign, supposedly eliminated completely in the war's opening phases. Rodriguez had been living as a human for over 8 years, using her natural abilities to perfectly mimic human appearance and behavior. She had chosen her cover identity carefully, a xenobiologist whose research could help her understand the biological weapons the Empire had used against her people. She had been working toward developing countermeasures, hoping to protect any survivors she might eventually find. The rescue operation itself had been a masterpiece of coordination. Vasquez had posed as a supplier delivering research equipment, while Marcus had made contact through coded messages in academic journals that Rodriguez subscribed to. When they finally revealed themselves, Rodriguez had been so overwhelmed with relief at discovering she wasn't alone that she had temporarily lost control of her shape-shifting abilities, reverting to her natural form in the middle of their meeting. Now Rodriguez was safe on Haven, working with other Kelter survivors to develop new biological technologies that could help protect the growing refugee population. More importantly, her successful rescue had proven that their methods worked, giving them the confidence to attempt larger operations. The network had grown beyond anything Marcus had originally envisioned. Tors had recruited a cell of sympathetic cargo haulers who could transport refugees without attracting attention. Singh had connected them with academics throughout Imperial space who were monitoring for signs of hidden aliens. Captain Vasquez had assembled a small fleet of fast ships crewed by veterans who shared their goals. Most surprisingly, they had begun to receive support from within the Imperial bureaucracy itself. The revelation that aliens were still alive, still preserving their cultures and knowledge, had shaken some humans who had justified the genocide by believing it was complete. Dr. Sarah Kim, a former Imperial propaganda officer, had made contact after learning about their operations through carefully placed inquiries. She now provided intelligence about Imperial security operations that might threaten the network. But it was the discovery of the Veil Collective that had truly changed everything. Marcus had been serving drinks to a table of deep space miners when one of them mentioned something that made his blood freeze. They had been working in an asteroid field near the Galactic Rim when their equipment had detected what their supervisor called impossible readings, energy signatures that suggested the presence of living beings in the vacuum of space. Supervisor said it was equipment malfunction, the miner had explained, downing his third shot of whiskey. But I've been working the deep black for 20 years, and I know the difference between a sensor glitch and something real. There was something alive out there in the void. Marcus had immediately contacted Lyra, who had gone pale when she heard the description. "The Veil," she whispered. "The miners found the Veil." The Veil Collective had been perhaps the most mysterious of all alien species, beings that existed in the vacuum between stars and communicated through methods that other species barely understood. During the war, the Empire had attempted to exterminate them using specialized weapons that could disrupt their unique physiology, but their distributed nature had made complete elimination nearly impossible to verify. If the Veil survived, Lyra explained, they would have the most complete knowledge of what happened during the war. They exist partially outside normal space-time, so they could have observed events that others missed. They would know the locations of every hidden survivor, every secret the Empire tried to bury. The mission to contact the Veil had required months of preparation and the cooperation of their entire network. They had needed specialized equipment to communicate with beings that existed in vacuum, navigational data for regions of space that weren't on any chart. And most challenging of all, they had needed to convince the Veil that humans could be trusted after humanity had tried to exterminate them. The contact, when it finally came, was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. The Veil didn't communicate in words or images, but in direct emotional and conceptual transmission. Marcus found himself flooded with feelings and ideas that weren't his own, the vast loneliness of beings scattered across interstellar space, the grief of watching civilizations die, and underneath it all, a hope so profound it brought tears to his eyes. The Veil had been waiting. They had been monitoring the growing rescue network, watching as humans began to save the aliens they had once tried to destroy. They had been preparing for this moment, gathering intelligence and resources for a revelation that would shake the foundations of the Empire. "Show him," Lyra had urged during their first communication with the Veil Collective. "Show him what really happened during the war." What Marcus experienced next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Through the Veil's unique perception, he witnessed the war from the perspective of its victims. He saw the panic in alien settlements as human fleets arrived, felt the desperation of parents trying to protect their children, experienced the final moments of entire civilizations as they realized that no mercy would be shown. But he also saw something that the Empire had never reported, something that changed his understanding of the war completely. The aliens hadn't been passive victims. In the final stages of the conflict, facing complete extermination, they had worked together on a project of staggering scope and ambition. They were building something, Marcus gasped as the visions faded. All of them working together, what was it? The answer came not in words, but in images that bloomed in his mind. He saw vast construction projects hidden in the deep void, refugee fleets that carried not just survivors but entire archives of knowledge. And most impossibly, he saw ships, massive vessels unlike anything humanity had ever built, preparing for a journey beyond the galaxy itself. "The Exodus fleet," Lyra said, her voice filled with awe. "The legends were true. In their final days, the civilizations of the galaxy worked together to build a fleet capable of traveling to other galaxies. They were preparing to take their knowledge and culture beyond the Empire's reach." The implications were staggering. If the Exodus fleet had been completed, if it had escaped the galaxy before the Empire could destroy it, then somewhere in the vastness of intergalactic space, alien civilizations were rebuilding. The genocide hadn't been complete, it had been an evacuation. "How many," Marcus asked urgently, "how many survived?" The answer filled his mind like a sunrise. Millions. Entire populations had been evacuated to the Exodus fleet before their homeworlds fell. The Empire had been fighting shadows in the war's final battles, killing those who had chosen to stay behind to buy time for the evacuation. But the Veil's revelation came with a warning. The Exodus fleet had left behind monitoring systems, automated probes that were still watching the galaxy and reporting back to the evacuees. They were waiting for a sign that it was safe to return, that the Empire no longer posed a threat to alien life. "They're coming back," Marcus realized. "Someday they're going to return to reclaim the galaxy." The Veil's response was complex, layered with nuances that human language couldn't capture. The returnees would judge humanity by how the Empire had treated the survivors they'd left behind. If they found that the genocide had been complete, that no mercy had been shown, they would return as conquerors. But if they found that humans had learned to value alien life, that the Empire had changed. "They'll return as teachers," Lyra finished. "They'll share their knowledge with a humanity that has proven itself worthy of trust." Over the months that followed, this knowledge transformed the rescue network from a humanitarian operation into something approaching a rebellion. They weren't just saving individual aliens anymore. They were working to demonstrate that humanity could change, that the Empire's vision of species supremacy wasn't the only possible future. The network expanded rapidly as word of the Veil's revelation spread through carefully monitored channels. Humans throughout the Empire began to understand that their actions in the present would determine the galaxy's future when the Exodus fleet returned. Some joined the rescue efforts out of genuine conviction, others out of fear of what returning aliens might do if they found only evidence of continued genocide. Director Voss had finally tracked down their operations, leading an Imperial security raid on a safe house in the Centauri system. But the raid had revealed something that shocked even her. The safe house had been operated by former Imperial officers, including a general who had commanded genocide fleets during the war. "These aren't traitors or alien sympathizers," Voss reported to her superiors in a communication that the network intercepted. "These are some of our most decorated veterans. They believe they're preparing humanity for an alien invasion that they claim is inevitable." The Empire's response had been swift and brutal. Mass arrests, interrogations and executions of suspected network members. But for every cell they destroyed, two more emerged. The idea that alien survivors existed, that they might return someday to judge humanity's actions, had taken root in the Imperial consciousness like a virus. Now, as Marcus stood in his bar late at night, reading reports from across the galaxy, he marveled at what they had accomplished. Thousands of hidden aliens had been evacuated to Haven or other safe colonies. Entire Imperial worlds had developed underground movements dedicated to protecting alien refugees. The Empire's narrative of complete victory and species supremacy was crumbling as evidence of alien survival became impossible to suppress. "It's working," Lyra said, joining him behind the bar as she had every night for the past year. "Humans are changing. They're beginning to understand that the genocide was not just wrong, it was stupid. They destroyed teachers who could have helped humanity grow." Marcus nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "The Empire isn't going to give up. Voss and her people know about Haven now, know about the network. They're planning something big." "Let them plan," Lyra replied. "It's too late to stop what we've started. The truth is spreading, Marcus. Every day more humans learn that their empire lied to them, that the war wasn't necessary, that there are alternatives to conquest and domination." Marcus looked out the window at the lights of New Tokyo Station, thinking about the vast galaxy beyond. Somewhere in the space between galaxies, millions of alien refugees were waiting for word that it was safe to return home. Somewhere in the darkness of Imperial space, thousands more were working to prove that humanity could be trusted with that return. And here, in a small bar on the rim of human civilization, the bartender who had started it all was still serving drinks and protecting aliens. But now he was no longer alone. Now he was part of something larger, something that reached across star systems and species barriers, something that offered hope in a galaxy that had known too much death. The Empire had declared that hope was extinct. But hope, Marcus had learned, was the most stubborn form of life in the universe. It survived in hidden places, grew in darkness, and emerged stronger than ever when given the chance to flourish. Director Voss might come for him someday. The Empire might discover Haven and mount new campaigns of extermination. The returning Exodus fleet might judge humanity and find them wanting. But whatever came next, Marcus knew that they had already accomplished something extraordinary. They had kept hope alive when all the galaxy's empires had declared it dead. And in the end, that might be enough to save everyone. Outside his bar, the first ships of what would later be called the Salvation Fleet were already preparing for launch, carrying not weapons of war but gifts of